Tom Blaylock here. I'm with 5 Capitals in Pawleys Island, South Carolina. And we're going to walk through today what I think is one of the most powerful self-assessment tools that we've had out there, especially over the last 80, 90 years anyway. We call it the 16 types, or originally the Myers-Briggs temperament instrument. And what I want to say by way of introduction before we jump into the PowerPoint here is the win in my mind as a coach. I've been doing couples coaching, marriage coaching, group coaching, executive coaching, leadership coaching for the last 15 years or so. And in my own life personally, this is a mirror to really see myself for who I am. It's one of the mirrors that we have. And if I know myself, and if you know yourself better, more objectively, if we can understand what it's like to be on the other side of us, what other people experience when they're with us, when they're talking with us, when they're working with us, if we know ourselves better, we can lead ourselves better, right? And so that's kind of a little mantra for us. You know yourself to lead yourself. If I know myself, also I can accept myself. Because there's parts of all of us, right, that are hard for us to accept. If I understand my wiring and some of the whys behind the way I respond, it helps me to accept myself. If I know myself, I can forgive myself, because we all fall short, don't we? We all have our issues and our hangups and our problems, and a better self-awareness. It doesn't make those go away, but it helps us understand maybe where they come from, and more importantly, some strategies to overcome them. If I know myself and accept myself and forgive myself, I can then forget about myself. And so I don't have to be thinking about me all the time. If I can forget about myself, I can give myself more fully to others, to the people that I love, to my children, to my spouse, to my clients, to the people that I work with, because I'm not so self-obsessed all of the time, because I've kind of worked through and gotten to a point of self-awareness, self-acceptance, and now I'm growing intentionally toward the person that I want to be, but I'm not living accidentally anymore. So many reasons why I think this is a great investment of 60 minutes of your time today. It has been a big game changer in my life. I'll share a couple of those stories as we go. A couple other things I just want to say, just as we get set up here. I'm going to share my screen with you right now. So we have an online assessment available. I think some of you probably have already taken that. This is just a screenshot of our website here. So if you've not taken the online assessment yet for your 16 types, for your Myers-Briggs, it would encourage you to do that. Yeah, a couple other things as well, just as we get going. I'll mention one of them again later, but 5 Capitals, we're a coaching organization, and we offer individual couples and teams coaching that flow with what you're going to learn today. So if you're interested in what we do today and you'd like more, of course, we have more to offer. And we do workshops, team intensives. There's a lot of things that we do. I just would encourage you to spend some time on our webpage and look at the site there, and you can see events, resources, who we are, what we do, and there's a lot of helpful information. For those that really want to lean in after the call today, I'll mention this again, is that we are going to offer a 16 types 5-week coaching intensive. Now, the normal pricing for that would be $249, which is honestly already a bit of a discounted price, but we brought that down even lower to $199. That will be in the follow-up email as well, being sent to you, but just a heads up, that'll be starting in mid-August. Go for 5 weeks. Brandon Schaefer, the founder and CEO of 5 Capitals, and myself will team up for that. And so if you're interested in that, we're going to make that available to you. So with all that, I think I have covered all of my notes there to make sure I told you about. Let's jump into the 16 types. And the first thing I need to say in terms of what this is, this may be really new to you. It was to me a few years ago. I was kind of a DISC guy. I had done other assessments, but I had not done a lot with Myers-Briggs until about maybe 5 or 10 years ago, probably is when I really started getting acquainted with Myers-Briggs. And so what we're doing here is we are helping you, and this tool, this instrument is helping us to understand and appreciate what our natural preferences are in these different areas of our lives, very important areas of our lives. So, you can think about being, I'm right-handed. Okay, so I have a natural preference to use my right hand. When I sign my name, when I do a lot of things, I'm going to use my right hand because I'm better with that hand. It comes more naturally to me. It's just, and I was born right-handed. It wasn't a choice I made. It just was kind of just how I was wired, physiologically from the very beginning. But that doesn't mean I don't use my left hand. It's a very important hand. I don't want to lose my left hand. I do a lot with my left hand, but I've got a preference for my right hand. So as we go through these preferences, think of it that way. You're going to have a natural preference either for introversion or extroversion, et cetera. But that doesn't mean you're only an extrovert or you're only an introvert. You're both, but you're going to be more natural with one than the other. And that's an important distinction to understand. So the 4 categories that we're going to help you to understand what your preferences are. First category, introversion and extroversion. And that's where you get energy. It's where you go to get energy. It's not about being socially awkward. It's not about, being sort of shy necessarily. It's really much more to do about where your energy comes from. Okay, so that's the first category. Second set of preferences we're going to look at is the way you process information. Now, all of us have how many thousands of pieces of data coming at us every day, right? In terms of processing information. So we are all constantly processing information, but there's 2 very different ways to go about processing information, and that's the sensing versus the intuition process. And intuition, by the way, for those of you that are new to the Myers-Briggs, that comes across in your 4 letters as an N, not as an I, because we've already used the I for introvert. So introvert, I and E, sensing, intuition, S and N. The third set of preferences that we're going to be looking at is how you make decisions, right? And there's a thinking preference versus a feeling preference. We'll talk about that. And then the last set of preferences we're going to look at is how you prefer to live and organize your life, how you prefer your preferred lifestyle, and that is judging or perceiving. And that word judging, in my opinion, is a little unfortunate because it seems a bit harsh. It seems like it's a bit of a negative term. It's not meant. It doesn't mean you're judgmental. It doesn't mean you're a critical person that looks down on others and you're condescending. That's not what that word means. It just means there's a certain way that you like to go about organizing your life and doing life. We'll break that down here in just a moment. So those are the 4 categories. We're going to kind of jump in here and let's look first at energy. Where do you go to get energy, right? And the screen here, we can see that introverts prefer to direct and receive energy from the inner world, the internal world. So we like to say in terms of introverts that they're battery powered. I'm an introvert. I'm battery powered. So where do I go to get energy? I go into the internal world of ideas, thoughts, reflections. I usually do that by myself, or I may do that with another person, or maybe a couple other people, but probably not with a group of people, right? So some of the key things that I'll reflect on, you can see the list there. I encourage you to read through all of that. But one of the things that we know is true about introverts is they prefer to think things through in order to understand them. So the introvert, they're processing, they're internal processors. If you ask an introvert a question, they're probably going to pause before they give an answer. They're going to think first before they speak, right? If you ask an extrovert a question, their lips will start moving because they are external processors. And as they talk, they are thinking. And those 2 things are very connected for the extrovert. For the introvert, they're not connected nearly in the same way. Introverts also, you can see a little further down on the list, they guard their thoughts until they're almost perfect. So introverts, sometimes it's hard to tell what an introvert's thinking, because an introvert, as they're processing internally, they don't want to say it out loud. They don't want to extrovert it verbally until they have really processed it and they know this is what I think. This is what I want to say. So they're harder to get to verbalize things, and they take longer to verbalize things than extroverts do. Introverts enjoy working alone or with a couple of other people. Introverts love to shut the door and be able to work without interruption and to be able to focus on what they're doing. And they don't mind being alone. They don't mind driving in a car for several hours in silence. My wife's an extrovert, I'm an introvert. So when we drive on long trips, it's a classic conflict because I'm very happy to be quiet and just to drive. She wants to talk. She feels like she needs to be doing something. So we struggle to try to find what's the happy middle ground for the two of us. iPhones help because it keeps her busy and it lets me just kind of do my introvert thing. And introverts give depth to life. Okay, so introverts, when they do talk, when they do engage relationally, generally the preference is let's talk about things that are meaningful to me, hopefully to you as well. Not as likely to talk about the weather, sports, things that are a bit more trivial. They don't tend to like social gatherings when I'm going to get introduced to 30 different people that I'm probably not going to see again, and we're going to talk about things that are kind of surfacey. That tends to drain an introvert, whereas an extrovert does pretty well, right, in those situations. So extrovert, let's move on to that. And by the way, this is 50-50 in the population. Half of you are introverts, half of you are extroverts, statistically anyway. So extroverts prefer, their preference is to direct or receive energy from the outer world. People, ideas, events, I'm doing things, I'm living out here, right, as an extrovert, and that's where my energy comes from. We like to say that extroverts are solar powered. So you can think the difference between a battery powered person and a solar powered person. The battery powered person plugs in, usually in the quiet, like my cell phone at night. I plug it in at night, I turn the lights off. In the morning, my phone's ready to go because it's battery powered. The extroverts, the opposite preference, and they need to be out doing things with other people. That's where they get their energy. So I've just a few highlights from our list. Extroverts talk things over in order to understand them. Extroverts love to brainstorm. They love, let's get a group of people around together and let's just shout out ideas and we'll put them down on the board. That's where they tend to do their best processing, their best thinking. Introverts tend to not like that. We'll talk about that more just in a moment. Extroverts, they share their thoughts freely. If you don't know what an extrovert's thinking, you're not listening because they're probably going to talk about it because they're pretty free with their thoughts and their ideas. If you don't know what an introvert's thinking, you probably haven't asked them, because if you don't ask them, they probably won't tell you, or you haven't listened long enough to really get, without interruption, what it is that they think. Extroverts also enjoy working in groups. You know, don't put an extrovert in a cubicle by themselves all day long in front of a computer and expect them to be energized in that job. They're probably not going to do well in that situation. If they are in that situation, if you're into that situation, there's going to be a lot of coffee breaks. There's going to be a lot of texting, you know, at lunch and doing things with other people, because that's very draining for extroverts. So they got to go plug in other ways to get their energy back up during the day. And extroverts give breadth to life. Introverts bring depth. Extroverts bring breadth. They have a lot of relationships, larger networks. They know a lot of people, but maybe not at the same level of depth that the introvert prefers for the smaller group of people. Okay, so some words that might help you. Some of you I know are kind of, I'm not sure which one I might be. These words might help you. Just look through those lists and see which of those two lists you most resonate with. And again, we're looking for what comes naturally to you, what you tend to do most of the time. Don't think about how you ought to be or you think you should be. Just try to reflect as best you can on, this is how I am. This is how I normally operate under normal circumstances, right? I know for me, I wanted to be an extrovert. Because in the United States, in our culture, we have a bias toward extroversion. We tend to think as a culture it's better to be an extrovert. So of course I wanted to be an extrovert. It wasn't until about 10 or 15 years ago that I finally came to terms with the fact that no, in fact, I'm an introvert. And at first that was a disappointment to me because I didn't want to be an introvert. But since then it has been so freeing in so many different ways to be able to embrace that. So look at those lists, see which of those two lists you most resonate with. I'll give you 30 seconds to do that. Okay, so You may relate to words on both lists, and that's fine, but we're looking for the one that you relate more to. Again, remember, you're going to be extrovert and introvert. You might have a slight preference, or you might have a marked significant preference, or anything in between. So hopefully at this point you have an idea, at least a good guess, whether or not you're extroverted preferenced or introverted preferenced. And in terms of application, examples, insights, I'm just going to share something from my work world. Okay, so what I have noticed in my work world as an introvert is that I don't like to be put on the spot. If I have a boss or a colleague that comes to me and they want to know right now, Tom, what do you think about this? We're going to make a decision today on this. We need to know in the moment what you think about this. That's hard for me to do as an introvert. Why? Because I want to process it in here first. I don't want to process it verbally first. I want that to come later, right? So if you work with introverts, and all of you do, if you work with more than a couple of people, the best thing you can do when you work with an introvert, when possible, is give them a heads up. Hey, tomorrow we're going to have a meeting at 2 o'clock, and here's the agenda. Introverts love a written agenda ahead of time, and here's some things we're talking about, and I would like for you to specifically think about this question. Would you come prepared to give input on this question? That is a gift to an introvert, okay? And in terms of extroverts, the insight for extroverts is extroverts, if they're not careful, they will tend to do something that we call boomerang. And boomerang is simply this. You and I are having a conversation. I'm an extrovert, you're an introvert, and you're telling me about your last vacation. You were in the Caribbean, you had a nice time, and you're telling me about the boat that you were on, the food that you were eating. Well, that reminds me of the vacation I took to the Caribbean 10 years ago. And before you know it, what started off as me listening to your vacation story soon becomes you listening to my vacation story, because it boomeranged back to me, and now I'm sharing, I'm extroverting. That may feel to an extrovert like I am just engaging with you in conversation, but if that other person's an introvert, it feels to them like they've been cut off and shut down, and now I just need to sit back and listen to your vacation story. So if you've got two extroverts, that's not as big of an issue because they can do that back and forth. But the introvert is going to feel interrupted, and interruptions for an introvert are difficult because the verbalizing, it takes more energy to start with. And if I get interrupted, then I might think, why bother? I'm not even going to share it. So extrovert, introvert, a couple of work illustrations there as to how you might use that. The next set of preferences have everything to do with how you process information. Okay, so all this information coming at me, texting and social media and television and my coworkers and just the news. What do you do with all that, and how do you begin to process all of that? Well, there's two very different ways to go about that, right? The first way is the sensing preference. Sensors like to take in information in a precise and exact manner. Okay, very sort of linear, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, very sort of linear, step by step. Sensors are the kind of people, when they put the IKEA furniture together, they actually put out the directions, they put all the parts aside, they get it all ready, and then they go step by step with that. And intuitives, which is the opposite preference, which is what I am, tend to look at the picture and think, oh, I can just do that. We just start putting it together. We end up with a bunch of extra parts, and the thing never quite works right. So sensors do a better job than intuitives with putting IKEA furniture together, certainly. But some things about sensors in terms of how you process, okay? So sensors, they like hearing the facts and the details first, okay? So if I'm engaging a sensor, the first thing they want to know are what are the details? How does this really work? They're going to have a lot of questions on the front end of something to understand it, because and they always want to access new information through their five senses, right? Sight, smell, touch, taste, and hearing. So they're very tactile people. They're very pragmatic people. They're very concrete people, and they want to taste it. They want to touch it. They want to feel it. So they don't mind working with their hands. They're pretty good usually working with their hands. Very practical application kind of people, right? Thank God for them, because I'm not one of them, and we need them in the world. They tend to live in the present, right? And they notice and enjoy what's there. They pick up on the details. the furniture in the room, what somebody was wearing, you know, when this thing happened, the details of something. So here's a classic intuitive sensor conversation. I get a phone call from a family member, a text, hey, cousin Sally had her baby. It's a baby boy. They give me a bunch of blah, 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 other information that I don't remember. So my wife comes home from work, and this is several hours later, and we're sitting at dinner, and I say, oh, honey, did you hear Sally had her baby? And she'll, oh, really? That's great. I said, yeah, isn't that great? And she'll say, was it a boy or a girl? And by then I've forgotten, because it's been like 3 hours, and I think about other things. And so I'm trying to remember, then maybe I remember it was a boy, and she's already annoyed with me. And then she goes, well, okay, it's a boy. What's his name? Oh, a name? They named that baby? Oh, I have no idea. Don't remember what the name was. I don't remember how long the baby was. I don't remember how much the baby weighed. And so she's frustrated. I'm frustrated because I think I probably should remember this stuff, but I'm having a hard time. Sensors tend to take in that sort of detailed information about a birth of a child, and they tend to hold on to it a bit better than us intuitives, and they can access it. They generally have better memories for detailed information. And the last thing I'll say about sensors, please read through the whole list as I'm talking here, but they value realism. They are pragmatic people. They want to know. They're not as interested in the grand idea of what might be and the beautiful vision of what could happen in the future. They're much more concerned about, how does this work today? Does this pen work? Does it have ink? Does it write? Does it click? That's what the sensor is concerned about. Is it going to be of practical use to us? Whereas the intuitive is thinking about, oh, in the future, we could have pens that levitate by themselves and that write by themselves, and they connect to our minds and we don't have to touch them. And wouldn't that be cool? Well, sensors don't care about that sort of thing nearly as much as what does it do for me today, and how can we make this work? Much more down to earth sort of folks, right? Intuitives, the opposite preference, think big picture, future possibilities. Our heads are a little bit in the cloud. We're much more interested in what could be and what's next than what's happening today, right? So a story that I tell sometimes about me as an intuitive, my wife and I got picked up by an Uber driver a year or so ago, takes us to the airport. She was a nice lady. I gave her a tip. We got to the flight on time, no problem. We're sitting at the gate, ready to go. My wife starts chuckling, Sandi starts chuckling, and she says, can you believe what that lady was wearing? And I said, well, what was she wearing? I don't remember. Nothing stood out to me that was weird or different. And she said, you've got to be kidding me. And now she's irritated with me again. Sensors and intuitives irritate one another. And I said, no, what? I really don't know. And the driver, the Uber driver, was wearing cat ears on top of her head, purple cat ears on top of her head. I have no memory of seeing that. I'm sure I saw it, but I didn't pick up on it. Why? Because I was thinking about, what are we doing later today? What do I have going on next week at work? What about this idea that I'm working on? So my mind was elsewhere, right? Because people with a preference for intuition take in information sort of in an innovative manner. So in other words, I'm thinking about the big picture. I'm thinking about what's next. I'm not necessarily A, B, C, D, E, F, G linear. I'm kind of jumping around from thought to thought, from idea to idea. And sometimes it's hard to follow an intuitive. It's hard to follow their flow of thought because they don't connect all the dots. They tend to jump around a bit. So a few things about intuitive. They like to hear general concepts first. Don't bury me with the details as an intuitive until you paint the big picture. Paint with a broad brushstroke. Help me to see the big picture. If I can get excited about that, I will work backwards from that big picture to the details. I'll get to the details, but I'll never want to start with the details, right? So that's very important for an intuitive. So sometimes it's better to bottom line something with an intuitive briefly, get him or her interested in the idea, then start walking through details rather than the other way around. Intuitives prefer the new and the untried, right? We're more pioneering kind of personalities. If we've been doing it the same way for a lot of years and it works, well, that's boring. Let's try it a different way. Whereas the sensor is saying, whoa, time out. It works. It works fine the way it is. Why do you want to change it? Well, because the intuitive likes that. They like the new, the untried. They like change. They like taking risks. And they like to take risks. Sometimes the bottom phrase here on your page is, is using a sixth sense, a gut feeling. Intuitives make decisions, or at least want to make decisions oftentimes on a gut feeling. They can't give the details. They can't give all the data that the sensors want. They just feel we ought to do thus and so. That will drive a sensor crazy because it feels very unsafe. It feels very reckless. And sometimes it is, quite frankly. Intuitives want to live toward the future. Intuitives are always anticipating what's next, anticipating what's next. That can be a great thing if the intuitive is mature because they're innovative, or it can be a problem if the intuitive is less self-aware because I'm never fully engaged in what I'm doing right now and the people that I'm with, because I'm always thinking about what's next. And so being fully here, fully present is more of a challenge for the intuitive than it is for the sensor. So some word pairings here. I'm going to give you 30 seconds. Look those over and see which of those two lists you most resonate with. So again, you may have some on either list, but hopefully one of the two stand out to you as your natural preference. In terms of application, my wife and I are opposite on every single one of these, so lots and lots of marriage applications. But the one that came to mind for me today is this conversation with my wife, Sandi, and I. I come to her with a great idea, because intuitives always have great ideas, or at least they think they're great. Honey, here's a great idea for this thing that we should do. And what I want is enthusiasm. I want engagement. I want her to be excited. I'm excited about it. Why isn't she excited about it? As a sensor, though, she's already busy. She's already got a lot to do today. She's working. We've got kids. We got things going on. She's engaged with what's happening right now. So for her to pull away from that to think about my big idea is taxing for her. And so what my wife said to me one time, she put her hands up and she said, "Let me sit down first." And she went over and sat down, and then she said, "Okay, tell me your idea." So, it wasn't exactly, the warm, enthusiastic response I wanted to, but what I learned later was I was wearing her out. I was bringing so many new ideas that it was just tiring for her. And I had to learn as an intuitive, before I bring that new idea to my wife about the next thing that we might do, maybe talk with some other people about that but involve some others in that. And let's just bring the really good ideas to her, and let's pick the timing better than when she's in the middle of getting dinner ready or at work or whatever, because she's going to be engaged in that, and it's going to be hard for her to pull away to look at the big picture. So you may be able to relate to some of that. I'm going to pick the pace up just a little bit here to make sure we get done on time. Making decisions would be the third set of preference pairings that we're looking at, and there are two preferences: thinking and feeling. People with a thinking preference they're looking for what's true, what's objective when they're making decisions, right? The thinking person, so if this represents a decision, right? I've got to make a decision about this one. Do I want to get that new iPhone X? Am I still good with my iPhone 7? What the thinking preference person wants to do is gain objective clarity. So they want to hold it out here, right? They want to back away from the decision and gain objective clarity so that they can make a logical, rational decision that's not personal. Right? Sounds like something a mobster might say before he shoots you, but it's not personal. It's objective. That's the space the thinker wants to go. So, they're going to seek objective clarity. They're going to question first. So you bring me an idea, should we do this? Yes or no idea. I'm going to look at the idea and I'm going to critique the idea. I'm going to say, if I think it's a stupid idea, I'm going to say, I think that's kind of a stupid idea. That's not going to work. Let's come up with a better idea. I'm going to do that. That's my go-to. The problem, of course, is that when a feeler brings an idea or is making a decision, it's very personal. They hold it over their hearts. So if I critique the idea too harshly as a thinker, forgetting that it's a feeler, a human being on the other side of that idea, I'll end up hurting their feelings. I'm a thinker, my wife's a feeler, and there have been many, many, many times in our 30 years of marriage where her feelings have got hurt, and I wonder, what did I do? What did I say? I'm not even aware of what I did, because as a thinker, it comes so naturally to me just to be black and white, cut and dry, good or bad. Let's keep moving, and that if it's a bad idea, let's toss it out. Kind of an approach to things. Thinkers prefer things to be objective. They don't want it to be overly personal, and they remain detached when making decisions. Even if it's my own idea. If I bring you an idea as a thinker and you say that's a bad idea and here's why, and you could show me logically why it's a bad idea, I'm probably okay with that. You probably didn't hurt my feelings, because it's separate from me. It's an idea. It's something I hold out here. It's not who I am. It's just an idea. It's a possibility. Feelers, on the other hand, they are seeking, when they're making a decision, they are looking for these things, right? Individual and interpersonal harmony. They want to make decisions about different possibilities, different choices, different options that they have in such a way that's compassionate, that helps them to express their inner values. It's very personal for them, and they're very concerned about our relationships and harmony. So when a feeler is making decision, their first go-to is seeking emotional clarity. How do I really feel about this? How do you really feel about this? They really want to know, because they're very concerned that if we choose A versus B, somebody's going to get upset. So the feeler is going to want to put themselves in everybody's shoes around that are impacted by that decision before making a decision, because that's very important data for them, right? That goes into the decision-making process. They're gonna accept me first as an individual before they ever critique my idea. So I bring a bad idea to a feeler. They're probably not going to say to me, Tom, that's a stupid idea. What were you thinking? They're probably going to say to me something like this: Tom, you're such an important part of our team. I appreciate you so much. You know, last week when you did this for me, that was so great, and you bring so much value. Now about this idea that you have, I'm not so sure about it. Can we talk more about it? They're going to be very gentle. They may never even get to the critique. They may just kind of go along with it because they are too worried about hurting my feelings. And that can be a problem for a thinker, for a feeler, excuse me, because if I can't bring challenge, if I can't bring critique, I'll just sort of swallow that. I'm still not happy about the idea, and it can come out passive aggressively later on. Feelers want things to be personal, and they're going to be personally involved when making decisions, weighing values. So choice A and B for a thinker and a feeler they may come up with a very different outcome. Even if they agree on choice A over choice B, they're going to get there in a different way. So it's very important to understand what your preference is as it relates to making decisions, right? So the word pairings here, give you 30 seconds, look over those, see which of the two you most relate to. So I'm going to give you another work example here. And it's a pretty simple one. I'm a thinker. And so when I write an email to a colleague, or generally a colleague, not as much as a client, but a colleague, I get right to the point. I ask my question. Leanne, can you get this to me today by 2 p.m., period, the end, Tom? My signature's there. So I used to just send that email. Didn't think anything about it. Once I started learning the tendencies of thinkers and how feelers and how they can come across to a feeler, I've added a little thing that I do now in almost every email. I still write the same email initially, but before I hit send, I'll read it a second time. And then I'll write something like this in the first sentence: Hi, Leanne, hope you're having a good day today. By the way, blah, 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 just that little greeting. Just that little moment that I took before I got right to the point, right to the work, right to the question, to a feeler in particular is it's a gift. It's like, hey, I recognize you're a human being. You have value. I do appreciate you. Yeah, we need to get the work done, but the work is not more important to me than you are. That's what I'm trying to communicate just by those little touches that I'm doing now in most of my emails. Right? Some of you may have gotten an email from me at some point. I didn't do that. I apologize. I'm working on it. Right? So the last set of pairings, living life, my preference for the way I organize and live my life. There's two preferences here: judging versus perceiving. Judging, I'm a J, I'm a judger. The preference is I like to come to closure when it comes to anything, making a decision, getting something done, completing a task. I want closure. I want it done. I want to check it off, and I want to move on to the next thing. I'm more structured as a judger. I tend to be maybe a little less flexible, certainly less spontaneous than a perceiver is. And a few highlights as you read through the list. I'll highlight a few things. Judgers like to get things done, not even just on time, but I prefer to have it done before the deadline. So I knew I had this talk today. Yesterday, I went through my notes. I put the PowerPoint together. It was all pretty much done by yesterday afternoon, put a few finishing touches on it this morning. That's the way a judger likes to get their work done. They don't always do that, but that's certainly the preference that the J would have. Limit surprises. J's don't like surprises very much. Of course, we all love a nice surprise, but J's have an agenda in their mind of how their day is going to go. I'm going to meet with this person this day. This time I'm going to get this done here. I've already kind of got it figured out in my mind how I'm going to get my work done. If you pop into my office and want to sit down and talk about, baseball or the weather or your last vacation, but I had something different planned for that 30 minutes, I might have that conversation with you, but I'm feeling stressed. Now I'm behind. Now I didn't get something done I wanted to get done. So I don't like surprises. I like to feel like I'm in a bit more of control of my schedule and what's happening in my work. J's quickly commit to plans or decisions. They don't tend to put off decisions. They like to make decisions quickly, which can be a problem because sometimes they don't get enough information before they make the decision, but they like the feeling and the idea that it's decided and let's just roll with it, right? And they like to have life under control. I want to cross my T's, I want to dot my I's. I want the dishes done before I go to bed at night or whatever it is. It may not be in every single area of your life, but in general, if you're a J, you like to have a sense of the details have been cared for, the work is done. And by the way, J's can't play very well until the work is done. It's hard for a J to relax if they know there's work hanging over my head that I didn't do yet that still needs to get done. Perceivers, not so much. Perceivers' attitude toward that tends to be, hey, the work's always going to be there. I can go play golf right now. It's a beautiful day. I'm going to go walk the beach. I'm going to take my dog for a walk. I'm going to surf the web for a little bit and do this, check out this site that I heard about, whatever it is. I'll come back to the work. And they're good with that usually. J's, that's harder for a J to do. So think of for J's structured, kind of predictable, controlled, all right? So perceivers, the opposite preference, they like to remain open. They like to adapt to new information. They want to postpone making decisions as long as possible because new information could come at any moment that could change the way I feel about this decision. And so I don't want to make it before I have to, right? So a few things about perceivers that I think are really relevant. They finish tasks generally at the deadline. Sometimes a little bit beyond the deadline, right? Because why? It takes the pressure of the deadline for the perceiver to make decisions. How am I going to do this? How do I want to say this? So they're going to tend to put things off until the deadline. They do their best work often at the deadline. So it's not necessarily a problem, but it might mean there's a scramble at the finish line for the perceiver. And if they can get their work done and they're probably okay with that, fine. But if they're living with a J or they're partnering with a J, there's going to be probably some tension in terms of how they go about getting their work done when they get it done. They like surprises. They're much more spontaneous. They're much more flexible. They're much more open to new things, trying new things, new foods, new games, new experiences. They're much more open than the J tends to be. They're going to stay tentative for as long as possible. It really does take, if you're working with a P and you need a decision made by Friday, you need to let them know, hey, by Thursday at 4 p.m., I need this back from you. You need to be very, very, very specific with perceivers. Let them know when the deadline is and realize it's going to be that day when they get it done, probably, maybe the night before, and that's okay. Don't expect them to work the way you would if you're a J. And the perceiver is always going to trust the process more than the plan, right? J's want to make a plan. We're going to do this and we're going to do this. And it's all kind of settled in their minds. Perceivers are much more open-ended and they maybe know by experience that, the plan never comes together the way you think it's going to come together. Anyway, let's let's remain flexible, and let's just adapt. Let's cross that bridge when we get to it. They kind of love that kind of language. Can sometimes drive a J crazy. They tend to drive each other crazy, like all of these preferences do when they're really opposite on either end. So an example. Let me give you these lists first. Take a minute, 30 seconds actually, read through those and see if you have a clear preference. Okay, hopefully that helped you. Again, you may have one or two, on either side, but hopefully you see one, you're weighted more one way than the other. The example that I was going to give, I'll give one more marriage example here. Conversation between Sandy and I say to her, let's go out for dinner tonight. She's like, great, let's do that. I ask, where do you want to go? She may say, well, there's this new hibachi place in town that I hear is good. Let's try that. I, as a J, think decision is made. Done. The conversation's over. We don't have to talk about this anymore. I say, great, we're going to the hibachi place. I have checked that box and I have moved on. But then she comes back a few minutes later and says, but we could just eat those leftovers in the fridge from that dinner a couple nights ago. That would be good too. And I'll say, well, I thought we were going to the hibachi place. Okay, yeah, let's just go to the hibachi place. And then we'll get in the car. And she'll say, I'll start the engine. We could go get Mexican. Mexican sounds kind of good. And as a perceiver, even though I thought the decision was made, in her mind, it wasn't made yet. Why? Because we're not there sitting down. We haven't ordered yet. Right? There's still time to change the plan. And she wants to explore all the options. As a J, I don't want to do that ever. I just want to make the decision. You do it. End the conversation, you move on to other things. Perceivers like to leave it open, which helps the perceiver, by the way, to be better problem solvers. They're more creative often than the J's are, and they're better at probing because they're always looking at the options and the possibilities, which sometimes brings the greatest innovation and the greatest help. So, okay, we've got 7 minutes before our Q&A. Hopefully you've written some questions down in that box. And I'll bring them up here in a minute if we did. If not, I'll just talk a little bit more about how this has helped me personally and in my life professionally. But when it comes to a tool like this so this is a classic tool that we use in 5 Capitals. We call it the Invitation Challenge Matrix. We're a faith-based organization, so we call this the Jesus model. All of our tools relate back to scripture and some kind of biblical framework. And what we are simply saying with this tool is that when you bring high invitation to somebody, or support, that would be another synonym for invitation. When you bring a lot of support into a relationship, and at the same time, when you bring a lot of challenge into a relationship, right? So this would be more people orientation. This would be more task orientation. But when those two things come together, I feel personally supported. I know that you're for me. I know that you're cheering for me. You've got my back. But at the same time, you are saying to me, hey, Tom, you need to step up. We've got a goal. We've got challenges. It's going to be a lot of work. It's going to be hard, but we can get there together, and we're going to do it together as a team, right? When those things come together, that is empowerment. In more biblical language, we would call that discipling. In general language, we would call that empowerment. And we can all think of a coach or a teacher or a parent or someone in our life that brought empowerment to our lives, opportunity and empowerment. They expected a lot out of us, more than maybe we thought we could even give ourselves, but the support was there. We weren't just out there by ourselves trying to get it done, right? So when it comes to your Myers-Briggs, I'm just going to look at feeling and thinking here just for a moment. If I have a feeling preference over a thinking preference, what do you think I probably bring more of? Invitation or support or challenge? Well, obviously, I'm better as a feeling preference person to bring invitation, to bring support, right? So I'm going to do this really well. Challenge is going to be hard for me because every time I bring challenge, I risk the relationship. That may offend you. It may hurt your feelings. You may not want to do that thing. You may feel like I'm being hard on you. So I'm going to tend to shy away from that probably. If I'm a thinking preference person like I am, I'm about getting the task done. I'm about checking it off, moving on. It's, you know, it's a logical approach to making decisions. It's not personal. So I will bring challenge where the thinking preference person is going to struggle is bringing enough invitation, bringing enough support. So what happens? So the feeling preference person, left to their own devices, the feelers are going to end up creating a culture in their family or in their work that we call complacency or cozy. It feels good. It feels warm. We all like each other. Let's do a group hug. It's great. And that's important. But we didn't hit our numbers last quarter. And you know what? We didn't hit them the quarter before that. And we're probably not going to hit them next quarter because we're having a hard time holding people accountable. We're having a hard time having the difficult conversations because we don't want to risk relationship, right? So that's where the feeler can get a little stuck. The thinker, on the other hand, can get stuck in the opposite quadrant down here where I have high challenge, low invitation, where it's always about the job. It's always about getting the work done. It's never about how are you and how was your weekend and how's your child doing? And hey, is your wife still sick? Is she feeling better yet? I'm not relating to you as personally. I'm relating to you more as, hey, you're a team member. You got a job to do. We got a task in front of us. And we want to hit our numbers. We want to win. I'm competitive as a thinker. So let's get it done, right? So I can bring a lot of stress as a thinker and discouragement to a culture because people feel like I'm just getting, all I do is work and I'm just kind of a cog in the machinery after a while. And I'm really not an important individual and a person, and they lose that along the way in the crush of all the work and the expectation. So neither of those are good places to be. As a thinker, I need to learn to calibrate more of my feeler. So even though it's left-handed for me, I can get better at it. And I can learn from other feelers like my wife and others how to do it better. As a feeler who's stuck in the complacency or cozy quadrant, I have to learn to calibrate more challenge. I need to have that difficult conversation. I need to bring accountability and challenge. You know, I need to say no sometimes to certain requests that are coming to me. And if I can learn to bring more challenge, then I can start moving toward empowerment. So this is just one very simple way, just took a minute to do this, to show how this tool, how knowing your MBTI, knowing your 16 types matters in terms of the kind of leader you are. You know, are you a leader that can bring empowerment? Are you a leader worth following? Well, only if you understand, you know, your natural wiring and the areas in your life you need to grow in, which is going to always be for us some offhanded, left-handed areas. Okay. So 249, the last couple things I would just want to mention in terms of next steps for you before we do Q&A. If you've not taken the 16 types online assessment, do so, and I encourage you to use the one with the link we're sending you, okay, from our website, 5capitals.net. There are a lot of free ones out there, but this is a much better one. It's going to give you a better feel for it. It's still always helpful to talk it through with someone who understands the MBTI and can help you verify that, but it's a good starting point, right? Based upon your preferences, you know, like we just talked about, do you need to calibrate more invitation or more challenge in your marriage, as a parent, as a friend, as a boss, as an employee? It might be different in those different relationships, but there's probably one that may stand out to you where you realize now that you think about it, yeah, I really do need to calibrate a step up a bit with a bit more challenge or a bit more support. How do I do that, right? And again, you first must know yourself before you can lead yourself, right? What is your next step? We all have broccoli in our teeth. All of us do. Right? We all have things about us that we don't see. This kind of tool is going to help us to see that broccoli in our teeth, take some of it out anyway, because no one else can take it out. We're the only ones that can take it out for ourselves. And what does that look like for you in terms of your emotional intelligence, the next step that you want to take toward, you know, really being a person that brings empowerment? And lastly, I mentioned this at the beginning as well, but we are going to be, Brandon Schaefer, the CEO and founder of 5 Capitals, myself, will be offering a 5-session 16 types coaching intensive. It's going to start here just in a couple of weeks. We are doing some special pricing for that, only $199. That pricing is good until this Saturday, and then it'll go back to the normal pricing. I showed that earlier. You will get this, by the way, in the email follow-up. But that's on our website. That's what it's going to look like. You can just go there, register for it, add it to your cart, and take care of the whole thing right there. So, 251. I almost made it. I came so close. Let's see if we have any questions. It looks like we have a couple. So Dan asked this. This was advertised in increased emotional intelligence. Okay. How 16 types MBs relate to this topic. So I don't know, Dan, I apologize for that. There's some confusion. We had a couple of different things that we advertise in terms of EQ, emotional intelligence. Enneagram is one of the tools that we use. As a matter of fact, we'll be offering another Enneagram a free webinar and a coaching follow-up class later, probably in August, and then coming back in September. Myers-Briggs is a different kind of tool. So Myers-Briggs is looking at what are your natural preferences and tendencies when it comes to the areas that we just went over. Enneagram's coming at it from a different angle. We don't have time today to really explain the differences between all of that, but they're different starting points. They're both going to help with emotional intelligence. Let me just take a minute and talk about emotional intelligence since Dan brought this up. Emotional intelligence really is looking at four things in our lives, right? And all the research that you read today on emotional intelligence would say that your EQ, your emotional intelligence, is as important, or in some cases more important than your IQ. You know, the knowledge, the skills that you have, those are of course important as well. But EQ is this: it's my self-awareness. It's understanding what's going on inside of me in terms of especially how I'm feeling about something in real time. And I'm understanding that, and because I'm understanding it, I'm managing it better. So it's self-awareness and self-management. Those are huge skills for all of us to have. If I'm feeling anxious, but I don't realize I'm feeling anxious, I'm not owning it, I'm not aware of it, I act out on that anxiety. I get irritable maybe, or I obsess. Or I get sort of stuck, on one thing, and I can't let it go because of my anxiety. If I'm emotionally intelligent, I realize, hey, I'm feeling anxious right now. Okay, I recognize it. That's the first part. Secondly, okay, when I feel anxious, here's probably what's going on inside of me. Here's probably why I'm feeling anxious, because I've reflected on it. And here's something I can do to help my anxiety level. I can walk away from the computer for 20 minutes, and I can go outside and I can take a walk. Or I can just, or I can pick up the phone and call that friend of mine who understands me really well, and just say, I don't know why, but I'm really feeling anxious today. Can we get together for lunch? I kind of like to process that. Maybe you can help me connect the dots, because maybe I don't know why I'm anxious, but I'm going to have some strategies for it. And then the other part of emotional intelligence is that I'm also going to be better at picking up on what's going on inside of you, right? What your emotional state is, what your body language is telling me, what your tone of voice is telling me, what your posture is telling me. I'm going to be more dialed into what's going on inside of you. And if I can be more aware of what's going on inside of you emotionally, then I can manage the relationship better, right? And I'm sure you've been in the situation before when you're talking to somebody and, I'm just going to get to the work and have you gotten this done yet? Blah, blah, and we just plow through a bunch of work, and I'm not noticing the subtle hints maybe that they're weepy, or that, that their shoulders are slumped, or that I'm being a little sarcastic here about the weepy part, because hopefully I'm going to pick up on that. But and then later afterwards, I find out, that their father-in-law is in critical care, got taken to the hospital with a heart attack, may not make it. Well, I totally missed it, right? Because had I picked up on the look on their face when they came in the office, I'd have set my agenda aside and I said, hey, are you okay? Is everything okay right now? Because you look troubled right now. And we would have gone there first, and maybe I wouldn't have even worried about the work just yet. I would have connected with them first. So that's EQ, very, very important. A lot of our tools really get at EQ. Enneagram and MBTI are two of our main ones. And then, Adam, how could we avoid participating in the boomerang effect? Well, it depends what side of the boomerang you're on, Adam, I guess. If you're on the side of the boomerang when the other person is boomeranging. So I'll go back to another marriage example. So my wife, as an extrovert, has a tendency to boomerang. So I come home and I'm going to share something with her about my day. And it's not as big of an issue now as it was, say, 5-10 years ago, because we both are growing in our EQ slowly, probably me more slowly than her, but we're slowly getting there. And she sometimes will end up talking about her situation, and it shuts me down. she's getting much better on picking that up. And in the past, she would say to me, well, hon, I was just trying to engage in the conversation. You told me about your day, so I want to tell you about my day. And what she is learning, and what I'm learning, is to say, if you would just let me as an introvert finish that thought first before we change topics or before we talk about what you want to talk about, that's going to be really helpful to me, because what feels like engagement to her on the other side of that sometimes feels like I'm being interrupted or that I'm being cut off. So what I've needed to give her is honest feedback in those situations. And also, of course, I need to give grace, because I understand that as an extrovert, she doesn't mean anything personally by that. She's not trying to be dismissive, or she's not trying to not listen well. This is her best effort to engage. And so I need to see the heart behind it. If I can see the heart behind it, even though I do it differently as an introvert, then I have more empathy, right? And that's a huge win for emotional intelligence, is we understand that when people are doing things on the other side of us that may not feel good, most of the time it's not meant as challenge or critique or anything else. It's just they are coming at it from a different perspective, and I can give them grace, and hopefully they're going to give me grace, because I'm going to need it as well. So a couple of questions. Thank you for those of you that posted questions. Let's see if we have anything else here. We got some chats here. Let's see. Okay, so this is, I think, more. Does the coaching intensive certify participants in MBTI? We have a coaching certification process, Leah, that we offer as 5 Capitals. It is not the same certification process that you would get from the quote unquote official MBTI organization. It looks like it looks like someone else has jumped in on that. Okay. So it looks like we've gotten through most of the relevant questions. I would say though, as far as the coaching certification process, it's a good process. It's a very good process. It's getting better. I have been through 5 different coaching certification processes over the last 5 years. We have, I believe, especially from a Christian perspective, a faith-based perspective, we have the best tools. We have the best approach and the best processes of any of the ones I've used yet. We do borrow, obviously, from other tools like Myers-Briggs and Enneagram, because they're helpful. They bring a lot to the table. But we have a platform of really biblically based coaching platform that really is aiming for, not just self-awareness, not just knowing myself better, because that can become pretty narcissistic, right? If it's all about me, but knowing myself better so that I can be a more empowering parent and a husband and a wife and a leader and an employee. The thrust of what we're doing with 5 Capitals coaching is helping people to thrive. Jesus said in John 10:10 that he came to give life to the full. And we believe at 5 Capitals that is the goal. We want to experience the full, robust, complete life that Jesus came to offer us. And that's not just for us personally, but that's for me to share, and that's for me to invite others into. And for us, that is the win. That is the goal. That's why we do this. And hopefully some of you will be interested, several of you, I hope, in getting involved in this 5-session, 16 types coaching intensive. Like I said, of all the lenses that I've worked with, and I've worked with all of them at this point in terms of personality, this is the one that goes the most in depth. It's different from the Enneagram. It's very good. I would really recommend looking into both of them. But I think starting with the MBTI for me, was helpful even before jumping into the Enneagram world, so that I could really have a framework for that and understand my wiring first. So, okay, it is 3 p.m. We finished on time. Thank you, Lord. And thank you for your engagement. For those of you that are going to watch this later on the video, thank you as well for tuning in. And we hope to hear back from many of you in the coming days. You will get a follow-up email from us. I think tomorrow that will come with all the follow-up information that you're going to need. And if there's any way we can help you take your next steps, figure out what your next steps are, whether it involves coaching with us or not, we want to be a resource for you. So don't hesitate to reach back out to us, at least by email, ask your questions. Let's get on the phone if we need to, and let's try to help you discern next steps and your next step of growth toward empowerment. So thank you, and we're gonna stop right there. You all have a good rest of your week.